All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Suter. I'm the founder and CEO of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center. Thanks and welcome to our ATARC webinar series. We're going to be talking about modernizing authentication through the use of identity management, which is near and dear to a lot of our hearts. ATARC is the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we're a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia. I'd like to welcome all of our attendees once again. Special thanks to Marcus Stadler, Jimmy Black, and the rest of the ISEC 7 and Hypergate teams that kind of helped put us together. We definitely rely on our industry partners. So this afternoon, we're going to hear from our panelists, followed by a Q&A session where we're going to pop a few poll questions and then answer yours. And you can ask your questions through the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen for you. And as poll questions come up, please answer them. That helps us get you the CP credits that a lot of that you need. So now I'm going to introduce the panelists. If you can come on camera. All right. Just real quickly, I'll do some quick introductions. Just raise your hand when I mention you. But I'll start off with Sam Michael, Chief Information Technology Resources Branch, Office of Administrative Management, National Institutes of Health, U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We also have Ross Ford, ICAM Subject Matter Expert, Continuous Diagnostic and Mitigation Program, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the United States Department of Homeland Security. And we have with us the various peoples, Chief Information Officer at the United States Army Corps of Engineers. And we also have Marcus Stadler, a global Hypergate lead at Hypergate. And last but not least, we have Jimmy Black, Vice President of Sales, Federal Civilian Government and SLED at ISEC 7. Welcome, everybody. We're going to start off, we can talk to you, Michael, but of course we need to know the background behind that tank there and what kind of fish are in your tank. I love that, by the way.
Oh yeah, it's just angelfish and some clown loaches, and the only background is actually the plant that you see started in a 5-gallon tank and has continued to grow until it's dominating the tank, which is the only thing I've ever been able to grow plant-wise. Normal plants die on me, so I don't know what it is about aquatic ones. But yeah, if you want me to give some background.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so no, I appreciate the opportunity to speak here, and obviously, you know, I'm part of the National Center for Advancing Translational Sciences, which is one of the IC's institutes and centers of NIH, and I was really excited about, you know, this topic because, you know, for some folks it's boring and dry, but I think everything we do at NCATS is a collaboration, especially in a virtual space. And a key aspect of any collaborative virtual environment means that you have to have a front door that people can access. And I think that this is something that NIH has invested heavily with over the years. And I really want to give a shout out to Jeff Erickson, who leads the NIH Identity Access and Management team, because many of the services that he provides are what we utilize for our research organizations. And so, you know, NIH really support, you know, standard federated protocols, SAML, OIDC, WS Federation. We have Azure multi-factor authentication with push notification. So, you know, we also have derived credentials for managed mobile devices, and we use Mobile Iron at NIH. And again, a lot of these have been implemented at the NIH Identity Access and Management team, and we really feed off of them because I really appreciate and approve of the shared services model. What we use that for at NCATS and has been critical during COVID is we have built one of the largest, not the largest in the United States, environments for electronic health records for COVID research, which has been called the National COVID Cohort Collaborative, or N3C for short, where we have essentially over 11 million patients, over 4 million COVID positive patients, over 13 billion rows of data, and over 3,000 researchers from around the world. And without actually having, you know, essentially federated access, this system would not be what it is to really allow this research to take place. And so really appreciate the opportunity to be on this panel, Tom, and looking forward to seeing what the other panelists have to say and also the questions from the audience.
Great. And what's your getting back to work strategy at NIH?
Yeah, so April 27th is when, so it's going to be a hybrid environment like everybody else. I mean, the good news is, I think the remote workforce is here to stay. And I think people showed they were able to be incredibly productive. And again, real shout outs to the NIH, CIT department, for keeping everyone working during this. And again, I think across the entire government, really, incredible effort. But it really is, a lot of folks are excited to come back in the office, but again, it'll never be the same with everyone back full time. So I think, again, the mobile in particular, and mobile authentication is going to be incredibly important, because at this point we do have a primarily remote and mobile workforce. So again, really pertinent towards this discussion area. But April 27th is really some of the dates that HHS has set to have everyone back.
Great. Thank you for that. Next, we'll go over to the various peoples, United States Army Corps of Engineers. And DeVarius, it looks like you're working from home today.
Well, no, I'm actually in the office. We've had some challenges that we had to kind of overcome on the civil side of the house, so it forced me to come into the office. Still working in that hybrid construct. So earlier this week I was at the house, and now I'm here. So just taking advantage of flexibility.
Great, thank you. Love to hear what you're working on. I know we got to get a prep call. We were talking a little bit on mobile.
Yeah, we've done a lot centered around mobile here over the course of the past, I'm going to say probably 12 months within the Corps of Engineers. As many may know, some may not, within the Corps of Engineers, we're a true remote organization. So even before COVID, 2/3 of our workforce worked at district and division sites, remote sites, whether that was to support our civil mission through your levees, locks, dam, waterways, and the disaster relief mission, as well as to perform construction. We're construction agent for the Army, for DOD. So thinking about building, construction technology, so many other things on camp, post stations, and hospitals. So we've been actively moving concrete, rather. Slab to steel is one of the mottos, but trying to deliver on schedule within budget. And in order to do that, we've definitely used mobile devices, iPads, iPhones. When you think about schematic drawings for construction, and when you think about things such as mobility, you think of identity. We are an Army organization, even though we have probably a 60-70% civil mission. We're still an Army organization. And it also requires us to not only implement a lot of the things that the Army has in place, but also leverage and collaborate with our Army and DOD brethren. So from an identity perspective, some may be tracking that DOD, specifically Army, has moved and adopted the Army 365 environment and some additional cloud services capabilities. And with that being said, identity is a key component of being able to enable us to be successful through the access of data, whether that's through mobility or even through shared services. So with all of those many nuances, identity, shared services, data, mobility, all go hand in hand as we support and enable the mission through not just construction, but civil as well as disaster relief efforts as well. And just happy to be able to share some of the things that we're doing from a Corps of Engineers perspective.
Yep, thank you, DeVarius. Next, we'll go with Ross with CISA.
Thanks, Tom. I want to thank Hypergate and I-67 as well as ATARC for inviting me here. I am Ross Ford. I work for CISA, and the program I work on is the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program. And we actually help the entire federal civilian executive branch build cybersecurity services. And my job is I'm the ICAM SME there, right? So I help agencies implement some capabilities around identity and access management. I'm also a co-lead on the Derived PIV working group, which is part of the Federal CIO Council's Federal Mobility Group. So as you can see, by doing both those things, that's because it's really tightly related, right? That identity management is a real key enabler of cybersecurity. And it's been really, it's been an exciting, a few years, particularly the last couple of years. I think people have realized that we can work in a different way than we did before, right? That it is possible to take care of business while you're not in the building, that you can use mobile assets to help you get access to critical services, and you can do it in a lot of different ways than we traditionally had been doing. And I agree with Sam, it's not going to ever go back to the way it was, right? And a lot of this is causing us to rethink our cybersecurity strategies. That's why OMB has come up with a real strong focus on zero trust, because it's the right approach to cybersecurity. And one of the central tenets, I'll say the leading and central tenet of zero trust architectures really is identity and access management.
Thank you, Ross. And next, we're going across the pond, as they say, to Marcus Stadler, hailing from Switzerland. How are you doing today, Marcus? You're on mute.
So I'm doing very well. Thanks.
Yeah, great, and love to hear your perspective, especially what Europe's doing. You know, I know that you have a lot of they're really into the privacy, and a lot of great technology companies over there. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's Marcus Stadler. We are a software development company dedicated to develop secure mobile software. So what we connect your in-house data with your mobility fleet in a secure way. We're only developing software in the small country Switzerland, in the middle of Europe, and we're serving clients all over the globe.
Great. Well, thank you for coming. Next we have, and I'm starting to date myself when I use these analogies, but I don't know if anybody remembers the old Light cereal commercial. Hey, Mikey, go try it. I think we have Jimmy as our Mikey of ATARC. When we start the Zero Trust Lab, he's the first one there. He's been here since the days of mobility. He is one of the first working group members that we ever had, and good to have you on one of these, Jimmy.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Glad to be here. Glad to be a part of it. Thank you for including us in this. It's certainly a great thing to be a part of these ATARC events, as well as the Zero Trust Lab that you mentioned. We love working with you guys and collaborating with government on things like this. Thank you to the panelists, first of all, as well, for taking the time out of your day to share your insights with everybody on here. As well as the attendees for coming to join us. So my name is Jimmy Black. As Tom said, I'm the Vice President for Public Sector and State and Local Agencies for ISEC 7. At ISEC 7, we're a global organization, but we're focused entirely on really providing services and solutions around digital workplace, end user computing, and specifically mobility solutions. So, you know, this is really an area that's near and dear to our heart, as identity plays a huge part in that, as mobile devices are, you know, out there in the field, in the wild, on the go, all the time. We provide our own tools, but we also, you know, partner with organizations like Hypergate that we believe provide a unique solution to our customers when we're working with them, and they have, you know, use cases and security requirements that they come to us with. We bring in solutions like Hypergate and implement those, and we believe, particularly in this identity area, you know, Hypergate provides a very unique solution with, you know, their authenticator application, their smart security for, you know, single sign-on experience on mobile devices, contextual based, you know, security applications and policies. So looking forward to bringing our experience to this conversation. I've worked in mobility for a while, focusing now primarily with the government, but I also have worked with commercial organizations in the past, financial institutions, healthcare organizations, utility companies, all who have some very interesting mobile use cases. So hoping to bring some perspective on that to the conversation too.
Yes, thank you for that. And I don't know if you've noticed, but in our chat, we are getting some very educated questions, like right out of the bat. There's no softball single type questions here. We've got one question for Ross Ford and others. As agencies move to cloud and increasingly use services and other automated processes, how are you thinking about ICAM for non-person users, such as virtual machines, containers, and applications? Do you believe identity and MFA should be applied to those users as well? Ross, you have some opinions there, and I'll get.
It's a great question. It's a great question. I'll say that, you know, traditionally we've looked, the ICAM services that the government looked at has been around, you know, user identity and access management. It actually was, I mean, early on when we built the first ICAM roadmap, we actually had NPE, non-person entities, as part of that when we were outlining the structure of everything you need to think about when you're building an ICAM service. But as we were helping the agencies, build their ICAM capabilities, we focused on what we felt were really the core enablers, right? And that was, having assured users on your network, making sure that people were using this really strong identity we have in the PIV card, and that was kind of we focused on the most, right? So in CDM, that's the program I'm on. We help agencies adopt, cybersecurity services and identity and access management capability that we help with. And originally, we were the same way. So we focused on primary employees and contractors, the PIV card being used in the network to get on the network. But just this past year, we introduced requirements on CDM, which will be to help us address non-person entities. And that really was, we knew we were going to get there, right? But we were accelerating our need to do that by the acceleration of agencies moving to cloud services, right? And so it's really advantageous to do that. They actually don't act exactly the same as you and I. They don't have the ability to take a first authenticator and then do a second factor, but there's other ways to manage those, right? To have a system that can provide programmatically strong security key to those non-person entities when they log in, and that's what we'll be focusing on when we do NPE for CDM.
Great. Devarius, have you guys really addressed this issue?
Well, we begin to really look at it. I'll say because again, it's not from my perspective, it's not a one size fits all solution. And what we're beginning to look at are the various program lines that are within USACE, and how they would be integrated evenly, I would say. There are certain areas where we begin to look at it from a network perspective, but really focusing on the civil and disaster relief perspective. I think that's really where we have to do a little bit more, or we have to mature a little bit more in that area from a Corps of Engineers perspective. But again, we've been looking at it from different angles, and one size hasn't fit all. So that's been, I'm going to say, not so much our challenge, but it's provided us to think a little bit more. I'll put it that way as we continue to evolve. Over.
Great. How about you, Sam? Great.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic question. And yeah, and like you said, no softballs right out of the bat, because, and obviously thinking a lot about this with regards to the adoption of RPA, the robotic process automation, essentially instead of using credentials. And even, at NCATS, I mentioned a lot of what we do on the intramural side is early stage drug discovery of high throughput screening, which involves a lot of robotics. And so we have many systems where it's actually automation and different automation services that need to authenticate. But I agree completely with what Devarius was saying there with regards to, it's not a one size fits all. There's different approaches to take because there's actually different types, of bots, which the question asker alludes to, right? It could be a container, it could literally be a device, it could be an appliance. So definitely something that we're considering. The multi-factor gets tricky for some of these, just to get in my experience, because this comes to where we, one thing we always try to find the balance of, and I know we all struggle this, is to make it secure, but not make it unusable. And I think sometimes, especially when you start, because, in many cases, again, when we're talking about users, if I were to say most of the users we have just want, say, give me an SSH and get on my way, and we can't always give that, and so sometimes we want to make it, again, secure, that balance between secure, but not making it so difficult, because then things break, right? Because I think it's another key component of this is, and then you have services which are essentially locked out in an automated fashion. Since you don't have a human in the loop, you could be unaware of it. So anyway, it is a tricky problem. It's a great question. I don't know if there's one size fits all solution, but definitely something we're thinking about here at NCATS and NIH.
And,
Great,
Tom,
great.
I just want to follow up real quick. What I do recommend is, when I'm talking to different agencies, is make sure you have your house in order first, right? The primary mechanism that it's being exploited is mostly around user identities and weak user password management. So really, the first principles are getting your user identity management in house. And then once you have that, there's you can do a lot of reuse, right? About how you manage those identities, because you're going to have someone that is going to be managing those secondary identities as well, right? You need to make sure that those people are well managed.
Great, thank you for that, Ross. And Marcus, you want to add anything?
No, I mean, most of the stuff is mentioned, but I mean, the decentralized identity management is a super big topic. We are also now working together with the Blockchain Foundation. It's a Tezos in Switzerland on a project on there. I mean, this whole onboarding process of the identity, we try to completely automate it through a mobile phone as well. So it's a very huge trend, I would say, in the industry.
Yep, and that was our second difficult question, that we're talking about blockchain for identity, and I think they directed that at you, Marcus, anyway. Jimmy, I know you've been working in like sensors and things like that, a lot of physical infrastructure. Interested to see what you have to say about this.
Yeah, so we definitely do play into the IoT side of things a little bit with some of our solutions. Starting as kind of Ross said on the actual person user side of things. It's kind of what you nailed down as far as the use case first, and then move forward. Think about like in a warehouse, if you want to automate some things on the warehouse production floor. The various machines or components that you have in there that are performing different tasks. You look at how do you apply those same principles for myself or Marcus or Ross, and how do you feed those down to those kind of automated processes that are going on.
Great. My next question is really how does mobility impact your identity access management strategies? I think some of the agencies found out the hard way. They didn't have too many people working remote, and then we had pandemic, and some organizations, the various organization had always been remote. GSA, there's a lot of others. It was a little bit easier, but and I know with you, I'll start off with you, Ross. I know that you didn't really address mobility before the CDM program, and now that's definitely in the focus moving forward.
Yeah. So mobility, it's always kind of like, CM has to take things step by step, right? And so the way CM usually works, what we do is you bring in information that helps the government or help first agencies get a view of their cybersecurity risk across their entire agency. And then there's a summary dashboard that the federal government can use to get to see kind of cross government the risk situation. Anyway, CDM is started typically by enumerating all the devices that you have, and then after that we enumerate the people that are using those devices. So we did the same thing with mobility, right? So CDM is currently going to be enumerating the devices, the mobile devices that people have, and then after we do that, we'll be addressing the users that are using those devices. I'll say that people are using a lot of mobile devices now, right? Because COVID came up and it made us really have to leave the office. Some agencies had laptops, some agencies didn't have enough laptops, and so people were using all form of mobile devices, right? Including some agencies have being their own device, and they're making that work because they have to do that, right? Mobility will play a large role, not only for CISA, but also across the federal, civilian executive branch. It is a really preferred way for a lot of agencies to work. The various you talked about how your agency is, your remote people going into the field, having a mobile device is the right way to do that. Recently there was a decennial census, and they deployed. I was on another webinar with a guy from Census, and they deployed tens of thousands of mobile devices, and they used it for a short period of time, and then that was over with, right? So there's a lot of flexibility you get from mobility, and I'll say that some of the mobile devices, it's really also you're really able to use them much like the way I use my laptop here, because you can put a derived PIV credential on the mobile device. That's what I have in my organization. And when I go to access government services that require the PIV card, my mobile device provides the certificate. So it's actually really very easy to use and a great benefit to us.
Great. Sam?
Yeah, no, agree with a lot of what Ross said, and obviously DeVarius as well. Like, we're mobile first now. We were even before the pandemic, and even more so. But also, again, to Ross's point about, derived credentials have been transformative. Essentially a lot of the hardware now coming with the TPM chip, and, take full advantage and have the certificates at the ready, because it's also, we always have to remember to make the best experience for the user as well. I think that's an aspect of it. And I think the simplicity, to the user is what makes it very attractive. And again, it helps us, in the positions we're in, actually manage these. So I really continue to see, again, we're going to be more mobile than ever. I definitely like the points Ross made too, because even when you talk about, we even talk at NIH, what is the distinction in some cases between a mobile device and a laptop at this point? Because performance wise, they're almost identical in some regards. And there's a lot of folks that actually work primarily off their mobile, and, the concept of a PC or a laptop is almost going away in some regards. So I definitely think it's something that's going to only grow in its importance, but always, again, focusing on making sure we have, a really nice seamless user experience, but also, ensure that security. And even, one project I'd love for us, we were playing around with it at NCATS. We're primarily Windows in many cases. We have a lot of Macs, but then also even during the pandemic, and a lot of the remote learning, just how powerful devices like a Pixelbook are. I mean, there's some really capable devices that for some of the basic needs that people, again, what do most of my users want? They want email and web browsing, right? They want other apps, they want Office apps too. And it's just amazing how some of these mobile devices now are lightweight appliances, have so many capabilities out of the box where we can still take advantage of the security. So just, I want to really agree with a lot of the points Ross made.
Great. DeVarius?
Yeah, no, I think all of those things definitely tie back together, specifically around mobility. From a mobility perspective, I think we look at mobility as really, I'm going to say BYOD, but maybe not all in BYOD, if that makes sense, because we're still federal agencies, right? So yes, you can have the beautiful bells and whistles of what your personal phones may bring, but then there's that back end big brother security type of element that we have to be sensitive of. There's also that legal component, from a mobile perspective, because then you think about monitoring and so many other things that, yes, BYOD brings a lot of goodness, but there's also things on the back end that we also must be mindful of. I know within the Army, we have adopted the BYOD concept. We have, and we fully adopted it. However, there are also still areas from our personal perspective that we also have to be very cognizant of, because those are sensitive topics, especially when you start talking about your personal phone that has nothing to do with the government or whatever the case may be. And now you have the monitoring and the reporting and those type of things. Granted, you're looking at VDI as to how you enable some of these concepts, but still there's that policy and oversight perspective that we have to be mindful of. But we are fully using mobility at a lot of these sites, and we're really trying to evolve from an organization in the disaster relief department. When you think about a Corps of Engineers, natural disasters, when you think about blue roofs on top of houses when the storm blows them over, when you think about even like places in Kentucky, boots on the ground helping to remove debris and those type of things, mobility enables all of those missions to be done. So definitely taking full advantage, but also keeping some of those security and governance aspects in the back of your mind. Always have to do that. Thank you.
Yep.
I
think
think
that Blue Tarp app is one of the first mobile apps that was done in the government. I remember that. That was like 10 years ago. And I'm sure you've evolved since there. And it seems like the DoD is moving toward a little BYOD. Maybe the COVID had something to do with that. Ross, sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, I was going to say, no matter what you're doing, you need to be cognizant of the sensitivity of the data you're using, who's getting that data, right? So when I use a BYOD device at home, it's a virtual machine that I can't save anything, copy anything. You know what I mean? It's just I get a screen, and that's all I get from my desktop, right? You know what I mean? So it's a secure way to do that. Yep.
Great. Thank you. And Jimmy.
Yeah, so for us, we really see is identity and mobility are really kind of intertwined together, and probably for the future always will be, especially when you look at it from kind of a zero trust perspective, and you apply those principles, particularly with what was in M2209. Mobile devices 5 or 10 years ago kind of came in and blew away a lot of the existing safety concerns about we manage everything behind the firewall, and then devices came around and they came out into the wild, and now, especially over the past few years with everybody working from home, it really changed that dynamic in a big way and pushed it along. But I think particularly just because of the nature of mobile devices, that they're always out, they're always on the go. They're always turned on. Typically, they're looking for something to connect to, and their status is pretty much constantly changing as far as location, what network they're connected to, maybe applications they're connected to, or even who actually may be using that device in the moment. So if it's BYOD devices, is it a dad handing a phone to his kid behind him to play with while he's driving? Those principles of zero trust with always verify, never trust come into play, just because of the ever-changing nature of what's going on that device in a given moment, more so than you saw traditionally.
Great. Marcus, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, as we're focusing on mobile, we see here extreme increase of demand. Even during COVID, a few mobile projects were on hold as well. We have to be honest. I mean, they're coming back now. People got a bit unsecured about the new working models. Travel were massively decreased as well, but still the projects coming all back. I mean, what we also can see is as the mobile device is more like coming into the main device. So I mean, even like business case wise, it's pretty important for a company to say, okay, we have a mobile device, instead the mobile device and the computer. So we have a few projects with Samsung DeX. I mean, that's what was mentioned before as well. So I'd say in the short term, the mobile phone even would substitute the computer as well. But what we can see as well as the mobile phone is getting more the entry point, it's also a much higher security risk on there. I mean, like the phishing attacks and everything increased also dramatically, even during COVID. And that's as well what we're working on. We developed a solution called personalized threat management, which means that we are able to creating defined rules which protects the mobile phone from threats as well. Because what we see at our customers normally know the point of attacks, or they know better their threats. And the threats are very different in various industry. That's why we created the rule engine, so the customer can define their own rules to really decrease that possibilities as well.
Great. Well, I don't want to get in trouble. I'm getting pinged as well. We're going to hit our polls. I think we'll do the first 3 questions. We'll just do them rapid fire. And this poll is like, it's definitely, I'm not sure. This is one poll. I'm not sure what all the answers are going to be. So are you able to reset your work Active Directory password on the mobile phone or tablet? We can submit that quickly. Okay. I think we closed that too fast, guys. My team. I didn't even get a chance to put it in there. Can we give a little more time? I'll tell you what, let's go to I don't think we had that open long enough. While we're figuring that on the back end, let's just go to the next question, and we'll just give it a little bit more time. Okay, what authentication methods are you using? What we have, we'll give it a little bit of time. Okay. But yeah, I'm not sure where this is going to end up. Sometimes I have a good idea. I'm not quite sure with this crowd. I think we've had enough time. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to click on something. Okay, can we put that up? There we go. Jimmy, is that what you kind of would expect?
I would think so.
Okay, great. One more. Go to the third one. All right. Let that go for marinate for just a couple seconds. All right, what do we have, team? Okay. All right, interesting. Next question. We're going to move a little bit over to the next question I want to ask is, we've had all these zero trust policies, right? How do we fit in identity management into this puzzle? I know it's part of it, but maybe we can start off with you, Ross. You know, I mean, you guys have had your own policies come out, so we're looking at those. Where does identity management play into one of my zero trust strategy?
Yeah, so from my perspective, you know, and actually I've been kind of following the deperimeterization movement for a really long time, so it wasn't a surprise to me that, you know, that zero trust was an emerging strategy. And quite frankly, I knew that identity was going to end up being a central theme in that strategy, right? I'll say that I think the federal government's trying to help not only ourselves, but the larger population of, you know, the industry, to really understand how important this transition to this new architecture is. And for ourselves within the federal government, we've put out a zero trust strategy, and more recently, CISA participates on creating a maturity model, so you can kind of determine where you are and how you kind of take that journey. And then more recently, through OMB's M2209, as Jimmy mentioned, there are, you know, specific actions that are being asked by agencies in the near term to do. And the ones around identity are really pretty important. A lot of them are self-evident, right? So, you know, the first one is you need to you need to know who your users are and manage them well, right? So that may sound interesting. You have to talk about that way, but you really need to take an enterprise view. If you're an organization, you take an enterprise view of your users and manage the ones that you are managing well. And that includes making sure that they can get some multi-factor authentication, right? So you're pulled there. We logged into your system today, and I think that's what most people are probably answering. And multi-factor authentication is critically important, but not ubiquitous yet, right? By any means, right? And I'll say that the federal government's actually even going a little farther than most industries do, where we're specifying the need for phishing resistant MFA. And the reason we do that is because we know that some individuals can become targets, right? And a target can be susceptible to phishing, right? So we want agencies to take a more either a direct approach, but a secure approach to those methods, right? And then the last thing is that we talk about in the identity piece is really kind of gets at the heart of what zero trust is. And they say and you know, I'm sure Marcus can elaborate on this, right? To take a signal from your devices and your identity and put those together when you allow access into your environment, right? Because we know that this is the heart of mobility, right? We know that users use a device, but we also know that those devices have a certain amount of health, and there's different ways you can measure the device status, right? Including using mobile device managers. And that is what we're encouraging people to do, because zero trust is about taking different pieces of information, putting them together in context, and then making good decisions, right? So that if one signal is compromised, it doesn't invalidate the entire trust chain that you're allowing when the person's accessing it.
Great, thank you. Sam?
It's honestly a little bit hard to follow Ross's answer because he answers much of it fantastically. But I do agree. One of the key things that he says was sort of the very basic good system administration. Keep track of your users, and he alluded to this, earlier as well. And I think this, a core principle of any sort of automation, in many cases, something the automated access is organization first, right? So make sure you have what you're trying to actually manage and automate organized, and then yeah, keeping track of your users. Agree completely with what he's mentioning there, especially about MFA. The importance is, again, NIH, we've had MFA enforced for many years now, and now with the prevalence of multi-factor authentication, and in particular, Ross mentioned too that this is critically important, for the phishing proof. Because we do have targets, NIH in particular, of interest. I think folks can probably guess, that are very high profile, and you want to make sure that you have an added level of protection for those individuals and your entire environment. There is an aspect of this too, that, not directly connected, but connected a little bit, which there's a question that was asked regarding IAL3. We're not using IAL3 at NIH. We go as high as Identity Access Assurance Level 2. And part of this also comes down to, it's kind of a great question. I don't have an answer to the question with regards to who will be providing that refresher renewal, but rather, if people can see the question, but I think it's contingent upon who is providing the service for you, right? Because, again, and I think this also gets back to zero trust. Part of this is the identity assurance level. How do you actually know who the individual is? And then how do you actually verify that over time? Because there's a temporal aspect of that too, and who refreshes it. So that's the only addition I would make. The only thing also that we haven't touched on yet that I just want to highlight, in addition to the security, which we really focus on, is there's also a huge privacy component. I just want to stress that, because especially when I mentioned N3C, and we have, millions of electronic health records as a limited data set, so they're not completely de-identified. The most questions we get really focus around privacy, and I just want to make sure we don't lose track of that as well, because I know we're all interested in security, but there's huge privacy components that I think we have to consider as part of, with zero trust as well.
Great, thanks, Sam. Devarius?
Yeah, so I think the identity-based aspect of zero trust is all important. When you think about users, I think it's important through the shared services concept as well. Being able to understand who has access, who needs access to what. When you think about technical capabilities such as DevSecOps, when you think about that concept, also when you think about shared services, meaning from a Corps of Engineers perspective, just a good example. We have the requirement to reach out and collaborate with many different federal partners, and we're a DoD organization. So sometimes there's always that identity crisis, or there's always that shared services crisis as well when you think about collaboration across the aisle. So one of the things that we've been looking at is how do you deploy or implement a zero trust based concept from an identity perspective to give those who need to have access the ability to do so. Those who may not necessarily be a DoD entity or a DoD organizational personnel have the ability, maybe from the federal side of the house, to be able to come in and leverage the things in which it is that we have. And a very good example of that is we've been looking at it around our Microsoft Teams capability. Federation. Federation is a good example of identity-based leveraging some of the zero trust principles. Within the DoD concept, being able to allow our federal partners from FEMA, DHS, even DOI and DOE as well, the ability to come into our environment, share, collaborate through the Teams capability that we have, which we're leveraging an IL5 environment for that due to some of the sensitive nature and classification of the data. And some of our federal partners aren't at that level of security. They may be leveraging an IL2, but still being able to collaborate, because in a time of natural disaster, FEMA reaches out to USAID, who is a DoD organization. So collaborating and sharing documents, having access are all critical to what we're doing, and leveraging an identity-based zero trust concept methodology is critical to our success. So just a good example of how we're looking at leveraging it across the board.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thank you, Devarius. Jimmy?
Yeah, I think one of the things that'll be really interesting moving forward, to kind of build on what Ross said about, attributes and data that you can collect from the device, and then DeVarius's point about, right people accessing the right data, even more than that, at the right time. So, combining that, all that data that you get from the device about what's going on in that device at a moment. There's so many different, sensors that collect information, and that can give you an idea of, what is that person doing, what are at that exact moment with the device, and what do we need to give them access to in that moment. So, one example that comes to mind, and Sam, I don't know if you've ever run into this, but like say a healthcare worker who has a device that they're using while they go around their day-to-day job at a hospital, and maybe they need access to patient records, things like that, while they're at the hospital, so they can look up their patients on the fly there. But when they leave for the day, when they go home, they don't necessarily need to be looking at Joe's broken leg from earlier in the day. So taking that data that they have to say, it's 3 a.m. in California when our hospital's in New York. Why is somebody trying to access this patient health records? So I think the contextual data and like the who, what, where, why will be very interesting to see moving forward and how that plays in.
I think that's going to be my next question, Jimmy. Marcus, you want to finish up this topic, and then maybe we'll go into it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, in a zero trust environment, obviously identity and to protect the identity is even more important. It gets more important. I mean, as Ross and Jimmy mentioned, contextual data is a very big thing. I agree, both mentioned for them. Maybe my thing to add is like, as well already mentioned a bit from Ross, the passwordless future. So we try to convince our partners and customers to go passwordless, because like the future should be passwordless, without password. If you don't know the password, if you don't have a password, it's pretty hard to phish it as well. So that's maybe one component I would add here as well. Think about passwordless future.
Great. I think Jimmy brought up a really good point. I'm going to just steal that question. How do you deal with folks outside your organization? And I think almost every federal agency has to deal with somebody outside their federal agency. I think DeVarius even talked about it inside your own agency. Maybe with, and this hasn't gone away in a long time. Maybe start off with you, Ross, on the challenges of onboarding people on the fly, and are they really who they say they are? Are they the sheriff of Leesburg, Virginia, for instance, if there's some event?
Yeah, I think, I'll just say it's not one size fits all, right? To quote my friend DeVarius, right? For normal access, right? If you're a partner doing business with the federal government, normal access, you got to be vetted, right? That's just the way we do business. If you're going to get onto our systems and get, be treated as an employer contractor, right? But there's a lot of business relationships, and Sam has a system that they have. They do a lot of grants and stuff like that. And so that is a different kind of a system he builds, right? And he builds a system that is appropriate for the risk that system is being exposed to, right? And then you mentioned something about when events happen, right? And that's another condition. And CIS, of course, we work with a lot of agencies and organizations, and when events occur, that you have to do what you need to do to really attack that situation, right? A really great example of when that stuff happens is how FEMA lets people come together in emergencies, right? And I had really the great opportunity when COVID started. FEMA asked for help, right? They needed help with getting vaccines to people. And I volunteered and I went up, and they gave me They gave me a PIV card, they gave me a laptop, and they sent me to where I had to go help them, right? And even if it weren't just me, they would have done that same to somebody outside of DHS, right? That they have a way to vet people and give them a card that is a secure card, even if it wouldn't be a PIV card, and then have them do their business. And they do that all across the nation, everywhere they have to address a real problem. And I'll also say that one of the early mobile identity problems that NIST looked at was about helping public safety professionals use mobile device to be successful in their organization. And NIST has a national cybersecurity community of excellence, and they had a project there, and actually it has a really great they had great outcomes about how to use mobile multi-factor authentication. And it was really well done. So it's a primary area of consideration for a lot of agencies in the government, right? Being able to address emergencies and have different people come together in collaboration, as Sam said, do their business.
Yeah, we're doing a lot more with state and local too. It might be an idea. I work these things out on the webinar, but I think it might be a good idea to have some working group around this, because I think this, defining these different scenarios, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure there's been work that's been done before. Sam?
Yeah, no, I think Ross said it well. And actually back to Devarius, I think he mentioned it with the federated access. I think it's just absolutely critical. And again, this is an area that NIH has had to have for quite some time, a combination of federated access, but then also what Ross mentioned with regards to the attributes, right? Because you have different attributes and essentially treating those as an or, not an and, right? So if one attribute doesn't line up, you don't essentially negate the entire thing. But again, at NIH for years, they've had in-common login with the IDPs, and they can also enforce multi-factor authentication. And this also, again, ties back to, in some cases, the identity assurance level that you want to have. This is also another area that, where NIH login, I think, has done a great job, has also been to integrate with login.gov, which does provide IAL2. So I think, again, the federated access is just, NCATS and NIH, we cannot operate without it, just by the nature, of how many universities we support. And in many cases, I just think it's back to the user experience. I think the expectation is single sign-on these days, and how do we do that in a secure fashion and make sure that, we actually also abide by all of the policies, so in many cases, the MFA for NIH, for example, will be, password and a PIV, but, for someone at a university within Common, it could be essentially a password and do a auth, for example, so I do also think it's not a one size fits all approach, but the example Devarius gave, I think, was fantastic with the different IL levels and how you can still have people federate and have access when needed. Is a great use case, but it is something that I think is getting more and more prevalent, especially within the government, as we have to collaborate across agencies, which again, with the prevalence of cloud and some of these providers, is just far easier than it was in the past. And I think it's really showing with some great environments.
Sam, I think it's really great that you mentioned In Common, because I think they're probably the largest federation environment that has been operating in a way that you can actually trust the model that they're using, right? And I think probably as the government goes forward, paying attention to what their lessons will really help the government as we build more additional federation capabilities, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the reason, for the system I mentioned, N3C, In Common is the default. And essentially then we use login.gov as the backup, right? Because, we want to make sure folks don't have, they're not registered with In Common. That, again, I do also want to tout, we've had great success and great work with login.gov and really appreciate a lot of the work that other government agencies have put in, to making this possible. But yeah, I'm glad you also, Ross, that In Common, we couldn't operate at NIH without them.
Great. I've got one question here that maybe we want to get at. It's been kind of sitting here for a while. Supervised remote identity proofing, or SRIP, I guess, is the trend in Fed for IAL3 credentialing. Once enrollment is performed, shouldn't there be a process to renew confirm identity enrollment periodically as part of authentication identity management procedures? Re-enroll and reconfirm every 6 months, for example.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. Tom,
yeah.
So look, I mean, NIST updated FIPS 201 with FIPS 201-3. They have pretty explicit, representation of supervised remote identity proofing. It's really, it's something that is important, right? One of the challenges we had with PIV and the policies you had is, you had to get in person to do the parts that now are written up as supervised remote identity proofing, right? That'll really help with flexibility. And let's face it, the technology, when we first wrote these rules, the technology, I mean, look, we're having a webinar now, right? And everybody can see each other and it works real well. And, the bandwidth is sufficient. I mean, that is what's changed, that allows technologies like, the supervised remote identity proofing be a viable option now. And, hats off to NIST to including that in as they update the FIPS 201 guidance. And I think it will be a really important element going forward. Now, to the last point here about reconfirmation every 6 months, what I think the industry is moving forward, and I know OPM's working on it really hard, is to try to make a continuous evaluation process, right? Take the information that we have about people and what they're doing and come up to a way we can continuously evaluate that, right? And I don't think that's something that every individual agency will do, but I think, at large, that's probably something we'll be able to do that to help make sure that the people that have access to our systems are, appropriate at the time they're doing the access. And that really is at the heart of zero trust, right? You don't want to have implied trust. You want to have explicit trust. When you make decisions about give somebody access, you want to have all the best current information you can have, that access request is valid at the time and the person that's making the request is valid.
Great. Well, we're getting closer to the end of the beginning. So final comments. Something we didn't cover or something that's peeking around the corner. I think we got about 30 to 45 seconds each. I'll start off with you, Devarius.
Yeah, I think for us, just to quickly close here from a usage perspective, we're looking at operational technology. And how does operational technology leverage things such as identity? And we have a heavy civil mission. So with that being said, we're going into the FY23 fiscal year, putting a significant emphasis on operational technology, not just with zero trust, but with identity, with data sharing, all of those other things that are associated, to include DevSecOps in certain areas where it may be applicable. So that's where we're putting our focus at, and that's how we're beginning to look at identity, zero trust, and some of those other principles. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that, Devarius. Sam?
I would really, one of the questions asked earlier was, again, related around blockchain and this digital identity, and we didn't touch on it, but one thing we have a lot of interest at NCATS, especially based upon some of the work that we do, is how do we essentially have consent at scale? And I think consent is very, very much tied to identity. As we're consenting people to access our systems, what are they as patients potentially consenting us? And so that's just something, I'd love to hear more in this community. Maybe I'll touch base with Marcus and Hypergate, because it's a project we've been thinking about, again, as more and more patients want control of their own data, how could they potentially provide consent for something? So just a real area of interest that we're pursuing at NCATS.
Great. Ross?
Well, I'm going to touch on that last piece, Sam, and HHS has been a leader in helping the industry develop technologies to allow informed consent, right? And that is just really a great leadership capability that HHS provides, and we're really thankful for that. I think I'm going to just close by saying that somebody earlier mentioned DevSecOps, and CISA also created and released a cloud technical reference architecture, which included a section about doing DevSecOps, and it actually will be a part of our future. Devarius had mentioned a couple times, identity is central to doing DevSecOps properly, right? And I think that's something that a whole webinar can be done on that just by itself, Tom.
Yeah, I agree. We got a lot out of this. Marcus, thank you for joining us from Switzerland.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe to summarize a little bit of the topic also mentioned from Sam and the super interesting use case from Ross regarding decentralized identity management or identity onboarding. I mean, the use case Ross was talking about, okay, emergency case, just hand over a device to somebody and let him somehow onboard. We're working now on a pilot where we use a passport, and we're working together with a software company. It's using on-border controls to optically make sure that the passwords are real. And as well, the modern passport are connected with NSE chip, and combine that with actual visualization of photos on the mobile phone. We create automatic identities. And that's also going back to the process of constantly checking identity. We could also connect that in a process where, like, after every 2 months, I have to make a new photo, check the passport again. So kind of automated process. And this is in the back end based on a blockchain technology. So that's super interesting concept. And then as well, Sam and Ross are always open to talk about that one, because yeah, that's definitely a trend in the industry. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. We didn't get a chance to talk, but I think blockchain is, and we have a working group around that. That would be really cool to do something in our lab around blockchain, because that's the future. Jimmy Black, I'm giving you the last word. Really interesting panel we've had. No pressure or anything.
Oh, and I was on mute for it. So no, thank you, Tom. I know we're up against the hour here, so I'll keep it short and sweet. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time today. I think what's clear and apparent from some of the answers and then just conversation that's going on is this is an area that's going to continue to grow, continue to develop quickly. And we're just at the beginning stages of kind of figuring out where everybody's going to land on it. I think the folks at CISA have done a great job of giving us some great direction for zero trust, incorporating identity into that. Some of the memos and guidance that are coming out there. So look forward to continuing to see more from them. Yeah, that's about all I got. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thank you again to Various, Sam, Ross, Jimmy, Marcus. It's fantastic. I really enjoyed this. Thank you all for joining us. And we've got an event going every day, multiple events, but let's show the next one we have on the agenda. Okay, we're reducing risk at scale. We're really going to talk about DevSecOps. I know we had a question about DevSecOps a little bit ago. So we'd love for you to, that'll be a DevSecOps. We've actually renamed it a little bit. So it's really on DevSecOps. Would you like to receive CPE credit for this webinar? We aim to please. We will get you that certificate so you can get your continuing education credit. Well, thank you all for joining us. This has been good. Almost lost my voice there. And we'll see you. Have a good rest of the afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you very much.